I live alone in a single-story house in a very quiet suburb of New Jersey, and this happened a few days before Christmas last year. I work from home, and that week, I barely left the house because of the cold and the workload. The neighborhood is silent at night, wide streets, few houses with lights on after 9. I always liked that calm. My routine was simple: have dinner early, watch something on TV, and go to bed. Nothing out of the ordinary, nothing that would draw attention. On the first night, I heard the bell around 10:30. It was a light metallic sound repeated in a steady rhythm, like those little Christmas decoration bells. At first, I thought it might be some child passing by on the street or someone going from house to house. I went to the living room window and saw a man standing on the sidewalk in front of my house. He wasn't in my yard, nor near the door. Just standing there, ringing the bell slowly, looking at the dark facade of the house. He didn't smile, didn't speak, didn't make any gesture. After a few minutes, he simply stopped and walked away down the street as if nothing were wrong. On the second night, the bell came back at the same time, 10:30 on the dot, as if someone had scheduled it. This time, I didn't go straight to the window. I stayed sitting on the couch, listening to that sound pass through the door and the walls, too regular to be a coincidence. When I finally worked up the courage and peeked through the curtain, he was there again, in the exact same spot on the sidewalk. Same posture, same rhythm. The dark coat reached his knees, and I could see the vapor of his breath in the cold air. What bothered me most was that he seemed to know the house was dark on purpose, as if he were expecting me not to react. On the third night, I was already nervous before it even got dark. I left some lights off on purpose and locked everything earlier. When the bell started, I felt my stomach drop. The sound seemed louder, maybe because I was already waiting for it. I went to the bedroom and looked out through the side window, trying not to be seen. He was still on the sidewalk, but this time he wasn't looking only at the facade. He was looking directly at the side of the house toward where my bedroom was. The bell didn't stop at any point while he was there. When it finally ceased, the silence was so abrupt it almost hurt my ears. On the fourth night, I didn't hear the bell. I woke up with that strange awareness of silence, like when you're expecting a noise that doesn't come. I checked the time on my phone. 10:40. I lay there for a few minutes, listening only to the heater clicking and the faint wind in the trees on the street. I thought maybe he had given up. Even so, I got up to check if everything was locked. That was when I noticed the marks on the ground outside my bedroom window. Clear footprints in the damp soil, starting at the sidewalk and going straight to that spot. They weren't old. The edges were still well-defined, as if they had been made very recently. My heart started racing, and I went straight to the back of the house with my phone already in my hand. The door was locked, but something hanging from the doorknob caught my attention immediately. It was the bell. The same small golden bell with the red ribbon. It was still, not swaying, not making any sound. Just hanging there as if someone had left it on purpose for me to find. I stood there for several seconds longer than I should have, trying to understand when someone could have come that close without me hearing anything. The whole house suddenly felt small, and the silence became too heavy to ignore. I went back inside and locked the door hard, even though I knew it was already locked. I leaned my back against the wood for a few seconds, trying to control my breathing. The house felt cold despite the heater being on, and my hands were shaking so much I almost dropped my phone. I walked through the rooms, checking windows, locks, anything out of place. Nothing else seemed disturbed. What made it worse was not knowing at what moment he had come up to the bedroom window and then gone to the back without making any noise at all. I had been awake until a little after 10. I hadn't heard footsteps, hadn't heard the bell, hadn't heard the door. I called the police and explained everything as simply as I could, trying not to sound exaggerated. They came, looked at the footprints, took the bell with a glove, and said they would file a report. One of the officers commented that if the man had only been ringing the bell on the sidewalk on the previous nights, technically, he hadn't committed any crime. That tied my stomach in a knot, because the problem was never the bell itself. It was the waiting, the rhythm. Knowing that someone stood there 3 nights in a row looking at my house, learning my schedule, and on the 4th night decided to get close enough to touch the house without being seen. After the police left, I couldn't sleep at all that night. I sat on the couch with all the lights on, hearing every creak of the house as if it were a warning. The neighborhood was completely quiet, which would normally calm me, but that time it only reinforced the feeling of isolation. I looked out the front window several times, expecting to see someone standing on the sidewalk again. I didn't see anyone. Even so, the image of the man there, motionless, ringing the bell in the same rhythm, kept replaying in my head like a ghost sound that wouldn't stop. In the days that followed, nothing happened. No bell, no new marks, no strange person on the street. That almost felt worse than if he had come back. The lack of explanation left everything open. To this day, around Christmas, when I see those decorative bells in stores or hanging on doors, my body reacts before I can even think. Because that week, someone used something simple and harmless to remind me of something very clear. You don't need to break down a door to invade someone's sense of safety. Sometimes it's enough to stand outside long enough. After that week, I changed small things in my routine without even realizing it. I started turning on the porch light before it got dark, closing the curtains earlier, checking the windows before going to bed. None of that felt exaggerated in my mind, just necessary. I talked to a few neighbors, asked if they had seen anyone strange on the street at night. No one had noticed anything. Some laughed, said it was Christmas time, that different people always show up in the neighborhood. That only reinforced the feeling that what happened to me was too quiet to draw the attention of anyone who wasn't the target. What bothers me most to this day is that the man never tried to enter the house, never spoke to me, never did anything that could clearly be reported before the last night. Everything stayed in that thin line between strange and it's nothing, and maybe that was the most calculated part. Because if he had knocked on the door or said anything, I would have reacted differently from the beginning. Instead, he stayed there on the sidewalk night after night, ringing a Christmas bell, reminding me that someone could be watching without needing to get close. And when he finally got close enough to leave a trace, he was already gone. Story 2. I was 16 years old at the time, and this happened on a December night just a few days before Christmas in a small town in Pennsylvania. I was working temporarily at a clothing store in the local mall, helping with the holiday rush. I always got out late because the mall closed later during that time of year, and I walked home because it was relatively close, about a 20-minute walk. The neighborhood was quiet and residential, with narrow, poorly lit streets and some houses already filled with Christmas decorations. I had taken that route dozens of times and had never had any problems. That particular night, it was cold, the kind of cold that makes your nose sting, and the street was almost empty. I had headphones on but no music playing, just so I wouldn't look distracted. That's when I saw a white van pass me slowly. It was completely decorated with colorful Christmas lights, blinking on the roof and along the sides, and it was playing low Christmas music, something instrumental, one of those old versions. I thought it was strange but not outrageous because a lot of people go overboard with decorations at that time of year. The driver didn't look at me, didn't say anything, just passed by far too slowly for such an empty street. A few minutes later, I heard the music again behind me. The van had gone around the block and was passing by again, at the same slow pace. This time, I took off my headphones and paid attention. The lights blinked in the same pattern and the music didn't change, as if it were on a loop. The driver slowed down even more when he came alongside me, almost matching my walking speed. I turned my face slightly to try to see who was driving, but the interior was too dark. I could only make out the outline of someone sitting at the wheel. He didn't roll down the window, didn't wave, didn't say anything. I kept walking, trying to act normal, telling myself it was just a coincidence. Even so, I started paying attention to my steps and the distance between the van and me. When I reached the next corner, I turned without looking back. I counted to 10 silently and then heard the music again, now closer. The van appeared at the end of the street, turning slowly, as if it already knew where I was going. My stomach went cold. It stopped feeling like someone just showing off decorations and started feeling like someone was deliberately following me, without needing to leave the car to do it. From that point on, I started getting genuinely nervous. I thought about crossing the street, but there weren't many options because there was almost no movement. The houses had their lights off, or only those small Christmas lights in the windows. Nothing that looked like people were awake. The van passed me again, so slowly that I could hear the faint clicking of the blinking lights along with the music. It was a soft version of Silent Night, restarting from the beginning every time it reached the chorus. The driver kept both hands on the steering wheel and his eyes fixed forward, as if I weren't even there even though I was less than a meter from the door. I picked up my pace. I didn't start running because I was afraid of provoking some reaction, but I walked fast enough that my breathing became short from the cold. The van kept the same pace, following effortlessly. At one point it stopped for a few seconds while I moved ahead and I thought maybe it was over. But soon I heard the music again, now coming from the parallel street. When I got close to my house, my whole body was tense, my key clenched in my hand inside my pocket, mentally rehearsing getting inside as fast as possible. When I turned onto my street, I felt immediate relief at recognizing the houses, the parked cars, the final stretch. The music was no longer behind me, and for a few seconds I thought the van had gone away for good. I walked faster, almost running now, and went through my gate without looking back. Only when I closed and locked the door did I realize how much my hands were shaking. I went straight to the living room window and pulled the curtain back just a little, trying to see the street without exposing myself. That's when I saw the van parked at the end of the street near the corner. The Christmas lights were completely turned off, making the van almost invisible in the dark. But the music was still playing, very low, just loud enough to reach my house when everything was quiet. It was no longer cheerful or attention-grabbing. It sounded distant and muffled, as if someone had deliberately turned the volume down. The van didn't move, didn't turn on its headlights, didn't give any sign that it was about to leave. I stood there, watching, trying to understand whether this was still part of the same strange drive-by, or if it had become something else, something that only ended when I went inside. I stayed there for several minutes without moving, just observing. The music stayed the same, not skipping tracks, not glitching, as if it were stuck at that point. The strangest part was that even parked, the van was positioned in a way that gave a clear view of the front of my house. Not the door exactly, but enough to know where I had gone in. At no point did the driver get out, open a door, or turn on an interior light. It was just the dark silhouette of the vehicle and that music, too low to be casual. My mother was asleep in the back bedroom, and I thought about waking her, but I didn't even know how to explain it without sounding like I was exaggerating. I was torn between calling someone and not drawing any attention at all. I turned off the living room lights and went back to my bedroom window, which gave a worse view of the street but left me less exposed. The van was still there. The cold felt like it had come inside with me because I was shaking even with the heater on. Every second passed more slowly, and all I could think about was how long someone would stay parked there without a clear reason. After some time I can't really measure, the music finally stopped. It didn't fade out slowly, didn't glitch. It simply ceased. I waited for some movement right after, headlights turning on, the engine starting, anything. Nothing happened for several seconds that felt far too long. Then the van started the engine, turned on the headlights all at once, and drove away slowly down the street, unhurried, as if it were just leaving after parking there by chance. I watched until it turned the corner and disappeared completely. Only then did I realize I had been holding my breath. That night I barely slept. I stayed awake listening to every car that passed, every sound that felt out of place. The next day I told my parents, but it sounded strange even to me as I spoke. There was no direct threat, no conversation, nothing concrete beyond repetition and waiting. Even so, I never walked home from the mall at night again. To this day, when I see vans decorated for Christmas, I feel an automatic knot in my stomach. Because that week, someone turned something that should have been joyful into a silent way of following, watching and leaving only after knowing exactly where I lived. Story 3. I live alone in an old building in Massachusetts, one of those 3-story ones with narrow staircases and windows that are far too large for how cold it gets in winter. This happened during the week before last Christmas. I had decided not to travel that year because of work, and also because my family lives far away. So I knew I would be spending Christmas alone, which wasn't exactly sad, just different. I was working a lot, stayed home almost all the time, and at night I usually went straight to my bedroom to watch TV or scroll on my phone before sleeping. The window in my bedroom faces directly toward the building across the street, which is very close, separated only by a narrow road. A few days before Christmas, I noticed that one of the apartments in the building across the street had started putting up decorations. Nothing unusual at first. Regular lights on the balcony, a simple wreath. What caught my attention was when one night I saw that he had put up new lights forming a perfect frame around a single window. It wasn't his window. It was mine. The frame of lights was aligned in a way that was far too strange to be a coincidence, exactly matching the height and width of my bedroom window. I stood there staring, trying to understand whether my brain was forcing that interpretation. But the more I looked, the clearer it became that the decoration wasn't generic, it was pointed at me. Over the following nights, I began to feel that strange weight every time I went into my bedroom. The framed lights were on every night, always at the same time, around 8 o'clock. At first glance, they just looked like Christmas lights, white, blinking occasionally in a soft rhythm. But every time I went to the window to look, there was this feeling that someone might be looking back from the other side, hidden behind the lights. I caught myself thinking about how it affected my sleep. My stomach twisted every time I closed the curtain, and the absolute silence of the street felt far too heavy. On Christmas Eve, the first truly strange thing happened. I was already in my bedroom getting ready for bed when I noticed that the lights started blinking faster, in a different pattern. It wasn't the normal blinking of decorations. It felt like it was responding to something. I moved around the room, and every time I stepped away from the window, the lights changed rhythm shortly afterward, as if they were synchronized with my movements. My body went rigid immediately, and I stopped mid-step, staring straight at the window. That no longer felt like innocent decoration. It felt like something watching, with far too much attention to be casual. I closed the curtain slowly, trying not to make any sudden movement, as if that might give away exactly where I was in the room. As soon as the fabric covered the window, the lights on the other side changed again. They didn't turn off. They began blinking at shorter intervals, almost like small repeated signals. I stood there, my heart pounding too hard, trying to understand whether this was coincidence or if I was connecting dots that didn't exist. To test it, I took 2 steps to the side. A few seconds later, the rhythm changed again. It wasn't immediate, but it happened too quickly to be random. I spent that night sitting on the bed with the curtain closed and the bedroom light off. The room was cold, even with the heater on, and I felt a constant chill along my arms. Several times I thought about opening the curtain again, just to confirm whether I was exaggerating. But something stopped me. The idea that someone on the other side might know exactly when I approached the window made me nauseous. I kept imagining that those lights were hiding something, some kind of small camera or sensor, something disguised within the decoration. The more I thought about it, the less I wanted to get close to the glass. The next morning I woke up early, even though I hadn't slept well. The first thing I did was peek through the gap in the curtain. The lights were still there, turned off now, hanging in the exact same position. In the daylight, it looked even stranger to see how carefully they were aligned. It wasn't improvised, it was precise. I could see the apartment they came from more clearly. Curtains always closed, no other decorations, no plants, nothing that suggested life beyond those lights. I tried to remember if I had ever seen the resident before. All that came to mind was a vague image of a quiet man, always wearing a dark coat, whom I had crossed paths with once or twice on the sidewalk without exchanging a word. I spent the entire day restless, working on my computer but constantly getting up to check the window. When it got dark again, I turned on the bedroom light before even entering. The framed lights came on a few minutes later, like on the other nights. I stood in the middle of the room watching from a distance. No music, no sound, just that constant glow coming from the building across the street. When I moved closer to the bed and sat down, the blinking changed again. Subtle but different. It wasn't something anyone would notice at first glance. But after nights of watching, I was sure the pattern was reacting to my presence there. That made it clear it wasn't just decoration, it was attention. That night I decided not to turn off the bedroom light. I left everything on, as if that could give me some kind of advantage. Even so, I avoided going near the window. I stayed in the opposite corner, sitting on the bed with my phone in my hand, pretending to be distracted. At times, I got up on purpose and walked to the bathroom, which connects to the bedroom. When I came back, I noticed the lights had changed rhythm again after a few seconds. It wasn't immediate, but it was consistent. That short delay only reinforced the feeling that someone was watching and reacting manually, not automatically. That gave me a knot in my stomach that wouldn't go away. I started thinking about how this could be happening. The distance between the buildings wasn't large. If someone were standing behind the window with some kind of lens or device hidden in the decoration itself, it would be possible to see the inside of my bedroom when the light was on. The thought made me turn off the light immediately, even though it left me in the dark. The lights on the other side blinked again, stronger for a few seconds, before returning to their normal rhythm. I sat there in the dark, trying to decide whether this was still within the realm of strange or if it had crossed into something I could no longer ignore. After that, I started avoiding the bedroom whenever it got dark. I spent almost the entire night of Christmas in the living room, sleeping on the couch with the TV on just so I wouldn't be in total silence. Even from there, sometimes I got up and peeked down the hallway to see if any light reflected on the bedroom door glass. It didn't, but I knew the frame was still out there, lit, pointed at an empty space. The most disturbing thought was that if someone was watching, they would notice that I had changed rooms. It wasn't just the window that had been marked. It was my entire routine. Late at night, I worked up the courage to go into the bedroom quickly to grab a blanket. I did it with my head down, not looking at the window. Even so, I caught out of the corner of my eye that the blinking changed again, as if someone had noticed my presence there for just a few seconds. That was enough to make me leave almost running. At that moment, I decided I would not sleep there again while those lights were hanging. It didn't matter whether I had proof or not. My body had already decided for me that something was too wrong to ignore. The next morning, I woke up with a strange mix of relief and fear. The first thing I did was look out the living room window toward the building across the street. The lights were still there, turned off, in the exact same position. Nothing had changed. I had coffee while staring at that building as if it were the first time I was truly paying attention to it. I noticed how dark the windows were, how I almost never saw movement there, even though it was a residential building. That made me think about how long that decoration might have been there without me fully noticing, just waiting for the right moment to be turned on. I spent the day trying to act normal, but any noise from the street made me get up. When it started getting dark again, I felt the same tightness in my chest. The lights turned on a few minutes later, as always. I stood in the living room, far from the bedroom, watching out of the corner of my eye. Even from there, I had the impression that the rhythm changed when I moved closer to the hallway leading to the bedroom. It was far too subtle to explain to someone else, but I felt it in my body when it happened. It wasn't just visual. It was the clear sensation of being followed, even without seeing anyone. That night, I decided to film with my phone, mostly to prove to myself that I wasn't imagining everything. I propped the phone on a shelf in the living room, pointed toward the bedroom window, but without getting too close. I recorded for a few minutes while walking around the living room, then went to the hallway and stopped there. A few seconds later, the light pattern changed again. It wasn't a continuous blink, it was an irregular interval, like someone had just adjusted a control. Watching the video right away, you could see the change, even if it was subtle. That made me more nervous than relieved. It wasn't enough proof for the police, but it was enough for me. I grabbed a coat and left the house that same night without packing anything. I went to sleep at a friend's house a few blocks away. When I left, I looked at the building across the street one last time. The lights were still on, framing the window of my now empty bedroom. The next day, I came back with my friend during the daytime, and the lights had been completely removed without leaving any visible marks. No decorations, no loose wires. I asked the doorman of the building across the street about the resident of that apartment. He said the apartment had officially been empty for several months, undergoing intermittent renovations with no permanent resident. To this day, I haven't gone back to sleeping in that bedroom without the curtain closed, because someone decorated a window that wasn't theirs and stopped at the exact moment they realized I was no longer there. After that, I tried to find some explanation that wouldn't make me so uncomfortable. I thought about automatic sensors, some kind of faulty timer, coincidence, but nothing explained the perfect alignment of the frame, nor the fact that the lights reacted only when I was in the bedroom. It also didn't explain why the decoration disappeared exactly after I spent the night away. If it were something innocent, someone would have left it there longer, or at least mentioned it to a neighbor. Instead, it simply vanished, as if it had never existed. Today, whenever Christmas comes around and people start hanging lights in their windows, I remember that week. I don't remember it with immediate fear, but with a quiet discomfort that's hard to explain. The feeling that someone managed to observe my routine without needing to get close, without saying a single word, just by using something that looked ordinary enough not to raise suspicion. I'll never know whether there was really some device hidden there, or if it was just someone standing in the dark watching patiently. I only know that that Christmas in Massachusetts, someone decided to decorate only my window, and stopped when they realized I was out of reach. Story 4. I am 28 years old, and this happened late one December afternoon, just a few days before Christmas in rural Oregon. I had gone alone to pick up a Christmas tree from a remote lot, one of those simple places where you choose and cut the tree yourself. My girlfriend was working, so I planned to go quickly and be back before it got completely dark. The problem was that I took longer than I planned choosing the tree, and when I realized it, the sun was already almost disappearing behind the mountains. The place was large, surrounded by tall pine trees with a dirt parking lot and only a few cars scattered around, most of them already leaving. The air was cold and damp, and the silence started to feel heavier as darkness set in. I had already placed the tree on the ground near my car when I heard someone call out to me. The voice came from inside the lot, among the trees. A man stepped out from between the pines, walking slowly with his hands visible, saying he needed help carrying something heavy to his car. He spoke in a calm, almost casual tone, as if it were the most normal thing in the world. He didn't look injured or in a hurry. What put me on alert was the fact that I hadn't seen any car parked near where he came from. Even so, I answered politely, saying I was kind of late and already heading out. He kept talking, coming a little closer, insisting that it would be quick and that he couldn't manage it alone. While he spoke, I noticed movement farther back between the trees. Two figures appeared almost at the same time, one on each side, stopping a few meters away. They didn't come closer, didn't say anything. They just stood there, partially covered by the shadows of the pine trees, watching. The man closest to me kept talking, repeating that it was just helping lift something heavy, that it would take a minute. My entire body went on alert. It wasn't immediate panic, it was that clear feeling that I had lost the advantage of being alone there. I took a step back without turning my back on them, gripping my car key tightly in my pocket. I said again that I really couldn't help, and began backing away slowly toward the car. The man stopped advancing, but he didn't move away either. The other two stayed exactly where they were, without exchanging glances, without reacting. That was what bothered me the most. It didn't feel improvised, it felt like waiting. I opened the car door still facing them, got in quickly, and started the engine with my hand shaking. In the rearview mirror, I saw the three of them standing in the same place, lined up in a strange way, just watching. None of them made any move to run or shout. They stayed there motionless, as if they were waiting for me to make some simple mistake, like turning off the car or getting out to help. I put the car in gear and pulled away slowly at first, afraid of skidding on the loose dirt, but as soon as I reached the main road, I accelerated without looking back. My heart was pounding so hard it felt like it was climbing up my throat, and I had to lower the window a bit to pull in cold air. Only after driving for a few minutes did I realize how tense my legs were, almost aching. I kept replaying the scene in my head, especially the silence of the two men farther back. They didn't need to say anything. Their presence said enough. If it had been a real request for help, someone would have explained better, come closer, shown the supposedly heavy object. None of that happened. I stopped at a small gas station a few miles later just to calm down. I stayed inside the car with the engine running, watching who came in and out until the sense of danger eased a bit. I thought about calling someone, but I didn't even know how to explain it without sounding exaggerated. Deep down, I knew I had done the right thing by leaving, even without proof of anything. What scared me the most was realizing how everything seemed set up to work only if I cooperated. They didn't try to stop me from leaving. They didn't need to. They seemed to trust that at some point someone would accept the request. By the time I got home, it was already fully night. I parked the car, went inside, and locked the door harder than usual. The house was quiet, but my body was still reacting as if I were in that dirt parking lot. I took a shower trying to relax, but the image of the three men standing among the trees wouldn't leave my mind. What bothered me most was the control they seemed to have over the situation. There was no rush, no threat, just the expectation that I would do the wrong thing out of politeness, out of habit, out of not wanting to seem rude. Lying in bed, I kept thinking about how often we're taught to help without questioning. That late afternoon, everything had been set up to look simple and harmless. A polite request, a common Christmas place, fading light, people leaving. If I had dropped the tree, if I had taken 2 steps in the wrong direction, I don't think it would have been easy to leave. They didn't run after me because they didn't have to. The feeling was that I had left before the right moment, the moment when it would no longer be a choice. In the days that followed, I tried to treat it as just a scare, something that had grown bigger in my head because of the time and the isolated place. Even so, small details kept coming back. The way the first man didn't seem surprised when I refused. The fact that the other 2 were already positioned farther back, without needing to move. It didn't feel like people improvising a request for help. It felt like something repeated, tested before. The more I thought about it, the more I understood that the empty parking lot at dusk hadn't been a coincidence. It was the moment when someone would be tired, in a hurry, and less attentive. A few days later, I told the story to my girlfriend. She stayed quiet for a while and then said something simple. That situations like that work because no one wants to seem paranoid. That stuck with me. Because in the moment I stepped back, part of me was still wondering if I was overreacting. And maybe that was exactly what they were counting on. Not force, not a direct threat. Just enough doubt to make someone stand there a little too long. Sometime later, I drove past the same road during the day just out of curiosity. The lot looked ordinary, almost harmless in the sunlight. Families walking among the trees, kids running, people laughing near the parking area. Nothing suggested that the place could become so isolated and vulnerable within minutes as the light started to fade. Looking at it then, it was hard to even explain why I had felt so afraid. But I remembered exactly the silence, the way the parking lot emptied too quickly and how the 3 men had appeared without making a sound. That contrast was what stayed with me the most. Today, whenever I see someone asking for help in a remote place, my body reacts before my mind does. It's not a lack of empathy, it's self-preservation. That late afternoon in Oregon, no one threatened me, no one ran after me, no one touched my car. Still, it was clear that something was too wrong to ignore. They stood there watching because they didn't need to do anything else at that moment, and I left knowing that if I had hesitated for a few more seconds, it might not have been so simple to get away. During Christmas week, while we were setting up the tree at home, that episode came back to my mind strongly. It was strange to think that something as simple as choosing a tree could have ended differently. I caught myself looking out the window at night, checking if someone was standing outside for no reason, as if my body were still on alert. I haven't told this story to many people, because it's hard to explain something that didn't quite happen but almost did. The kind of situation where everything depends on one step more or one step less. What stayed with me wasn't a violent image or a clear threat. It was the silence. The way they stood there without hurry, without reaction, as if the mistake had to come from me. To this day, when I think about that parking lot among the pine trees, I think about how some dangerous situations don't announce themselves with shouting or chaos. Sometimes they just wait for you to be too polite, too tired or too distracted to realize you're already surrounded. Story 5. I was 24 years old and worked at a small gift shop in rural Ohio. This happened during the week of Christmas, when the shop stayed open later because of the holiday rush. I was one of the last people to leave almost every day because I helped close the register and organize the stock. That year, I was living alone for the first time and trying to save money, so I spent most of my time going back and forth between work and home. My routine was predictable. I arrived early, left late, and always took the same route. I liked that predictability because it made me feel safe. A few days before Christmas, between one customer and another, I took advantage of a slower moment to buy a gift for my mother. I chose a specific mug, wrapped it right there in the shop, and put it away in my locker. I left early that day with the manager's permission, something that almost never happened. I went back to my normal routine the next day and didn't think about it again. It was 2 days later that a man came into the shop close to closing time. He seemed ordinary at first glance. Simple clothes, nothing that stood out. He walked through the aisles without picking anything up and came straight to the counter where I was alone. He leaned against the counter as if he were going to ask a simple question and said, in a tone that was far too calm, that week had been hectic for everyone. I agreed out of politeness, already starting to prepare to close the register. That was when he commented, without changing his expression, that I must be relieved to have already bought my mother's present. I was confused and asked how he knew I hadn't bought everything yet. He tilted his head slightly and replied that he was talking about the blue mug, the one I had bought on Tuesday when I left work early. The way he said it wasn't provocative. It was factual, like someone stating something obvious. My body reacted before I could think properly. I felt heat rush up my face and my hands went cold on the counter. I asked if he was confusing me with someone else, laughing nervously. He slowly shook his head and said no, that he remembered well because it wasn't every day that someone left early from that shop. He added that the wrapping paper I had used was pretty, the one with small golden trees. I had never shown that wrapping paper to anyone outside the shop. At that moment, the shop felt too big and too empty. The silence between us became heavy, and he just looked at me, waiting for me to say something. I ended the conversation by saying that I needed to close the shop and that he would have to leave. My voice came out steady, but inside I was shaking. He didn't argue, didn't smile, didn't try to explain himself. He simply nodded, wished me a Merry Christmas, and walked out slowly as if nothing had happened. I stood behind the counter for a few seconds, trying to organize my thoughts. I mentally reviewed everything he had said, looking for some detail that would make it less personal. I found nothing. He knew the object, the day, and the reason I'd left early. Things that wouldn't be visible to an ordinary customer. When I finished closing the shop and went out through the back, I felt that strange tightness even before opening the door. On the ground, right up against the wall, there was a small wrapped package. The paper was exactly the same one I had used for my mother's gift. Same pattern, same folded corners. I stood there staring at it, feeling my stomach churn. I didn't touch it. I ran back inside and called the manager, then the police. While I waited, I kept looking at the external camera feed, with the feeling that someone might be watching from somewhere outside the lens's reach. The police arrived a few minutes later and collected the package using gloves. Inside, there was nothing dangerous, just crumpled paper filling the space, as if someone simply wanted me to find it. The officers asked if I recognized anyone who could have done that, and I could only repeat that it was a customer, someone I had never seen before. They wrote everything down, said they would file a report, but made it clear that without a direct threat or catching someone in the act, there wasn't much they could do at that moment. That left me with a bad feeling, as if something had started and hadn't ended yet. In the days that followed, I began to notice a car appearing far too often on my way home, a dark sedan. Nothing about it that stood out, but it showed up behind me at different times. At first, I tried to convince myself it was a coincidence, but when it made exactly the same turns I did 3 nights in a row, I felt the same cold knot in my stomach that I had felt in the shop. I varied my route, slowed down, sped up a little, and the car stayed there, always at a safe distance, never honking, never trying to pass. It was as if it wanted to be seen, but not enough to draw attention. On the 4th night, I decided not to go straight home. Instead, I turned onto a busier street and pulled into the parking lot of a supermarket that was still open. The car pulled in behind me, but didn't park. It stayed stopped near the entrance for a few seconds and then left, as if it had lost interest at that moment. I sat in the car with the engine running, trying to control my breathing, watching through the mirrors. That confirmed it wasn't a coincidence. Someone was following me and only backed off when there were other people around. The feeling of being tracked, measured, and watched came back in full force. The next day, I told the police everything again, now with the history of the car. They told me to call immediately if I saw the vehicle again. It didn't take long. 2 days later, the sedan appeared again as I was leaving work. This time, I managed to drive to the police station instead of going home. The car tried to keep its distance but ended up passing slowly in front of the police building. One of the officers outside wrote down the license plate immediately and went out to approach the driver. I stayed inside, hands sweaty, watching through the window, feeling a mix of fear and relief. After that, the car never appeared again. The police didn't tell me many details about the driver, only that he had been formally warned and instructed not to approach me or my workplace again. There was no arrest, no full explanation. They only said that he claimed it was a misunderstanding and denied any bad intentions. I didn't recognize his face with absolute certainty, but something about his posture matched the man from the shop. I didn't need official confirmation to know. The sudden silence was enough. Even so, nothing truly went back to normal. I kept working at the shop until the end of that season, but I started leaving only with someone else and changed my hours when I could. I threw away the gift wrap I still had at home, even knowing that didn't make much sense. To this day, when someone comments on something too personal without a clear reason, my body reacts before my mind does. Because that Christmas week in Ohio, someone knew exactly what I bought when I left early and which way I went home, and made it clear that they were paying far too much attention. Story 6. I was 10 years old when this happened, and I lived with my parents in a medium-sized residential building in Illinois. It was December, close to Christmas, and the building had organized a simple little party in the common hall, the kind meant for children. Hot chocolate, cookies, music, and a man dressed as Santa Claus handing out presents. I was excited because it was one of the few events of the year when all the families came downstairs together. My parents stayed talking with other residents, and I ran around the hall with the other kids. Everything seemed normal, noisy and a bit chaotic, like anything involving lots of children. Santa arrived in the middle of the party, brought in by the building manager. The costume was good, a big white beard, a complete red outfit, gloves and boots. He didn't talk much, just laughed softly and called the children one by one to hand out the gifts. I remember thinking it was strange that he barely spoke, but no one commented on it. After a while, the party ended, families started heading upstairs, and I went up with my parents to our apartment. It was already night, and I assumed Santa had left along with the manager. A few hours later, I woke up feeling thirsty. The apartment was quiet, and my parents had already gone to sleep. I left my room quietly and went to the kitchen, trying not to make any noise. When I was coming back, I heard footsteps in the building hallway outside the apartment. They weren't fast or heavy footsteps. They were slow, dragging, like someone walking without any hurry at all. I stopped near the door and listened. I remembered that sometimes a neighbor came home late, but this sounded different, more constant, going back and forth along the hallway. Curious, I climbed onto a small stool near the door to peek through the peephole. That's when I saw Santa Claus. He was still wearing the full costume, exactly like at the party, without having taken anything off. He was walking slowly down the hallway, passing by the doors, looking at some of them as he walked. He wasn't carrying a sack of presents. He wasn't talking to anyone. He was just walking. My heart started pounding because it didn't make any sense. The party had ended hours earlier and the building should have been quiet. Even so, he was still there, as if he hadn't finished whatever he had come to do. He stopped in front of the elevator on the floor and stood there staring at the closed doors. He didn't press any buttons. He didn't move. He just stood there, his head slightly tilted, as if he were waiting for something to happen. I felt a tightness in my chest and climbed down from the stool quickly, afraid of making noise. I leaned against the apartment hallway wall, trying to decide whether to wake my parents. Part of me thought it might just be an adult from the building joking around or waiting for someone. Another part knew it made no sense at all for someone to be walking around in a costume like that so late. I worked up the courage and climbed onto the stool again to look one more time. Santa had moved. Now he was standing right in front of our apartment door. He wasn't knocking. He wasn't ringing the doorbell. He was just standing there looking at the door as if he knew exactly who lived there. Through the peephole, I could see the details of the costume up close. The beard slightly crooked, the heavy red suit, the motionless gloves. He didn't move even a little. I felt a different kind of fear. The quiet kind you feel when you realize something is wrong but can't explain why. I stood there for what felt like a very long time. My legs started to ache from standing still, and I held my breath every time the building made any normal nighttime creak. Santa stayed in the same position without moving his head, without adjusting his clothes, without making a sound. He didn't look like someone tired waiting for a door to open. He looked like someone determined to stay there. I started to think that maybe he was waiting for my parents to come out or for someone to open the door by mistake. That thought made me climb down carefully and go to my parents' bedroom. I woke my father in a whisper and told him there was someone in the hallway. He got up half confused, thinking I had had a nightmare. When we got near the door, he looked through the peephole. I remember the way his face changed, becoming serious immediately. He didn't say anything for a few seconds, just told me to go to the bedroom and stay with my mother. I heard him unlock the door slightly, just enough to speak loudly into the hallway, asking if someone needed help. There was no immediate response, just the heavy silence of the building hallway. After a few seconds, we heard footsteps moving away. They weren't fast and they didn't sound rushed. My father opened the door just a little and looked both ways down the hallway, but the man had already turned the corner toward the stairs. He didn't chase after him. He just locked the door again and came back to the bedroom. I stayed awake, listening to any sound coming from outside, while my parents spoke quietly about calling the building manager in the morning. The building was officially empty at that hour, with no staff, no event, and no one authorized to be there. The next morning, my father went downstairs early to talk to the manager. She said that the man dressed as Santa had left right after the party, along with her, and that no one was authorized to stay in the building afterward. She also said that he didn't live there and had been hired only for the event. The hallway cameras didn't show anything strange, just several minutes of empty footage during the night. Even so, for weeks I avoided walking down the hallway alone at night. Because that Christmas night in Illinois, someone decided to keep wearing the costume after the party was over, and stopped exactly in front of our door, as if he knew who was inside. For a long time after that, I tried to convince myself that it had just been a lost adult, someone drunk or confused who didn't know where to go after the party. But that explanation never really fit. Lost people knock on doors, ask for help, say something. That man did none of that. He walked the hallways in silence, stopped in front of specific doors, and stayed there, motionless, as if he were choosing or confirming something. That is what bothered me most as I got older and began to remember that night more clearly. My parents never talked much about it afterward. The building manager reinforced the rules for events in the building, changed the locks on common areas, and said that it couldn't have happened. But no one ever explained how someone wandered around for hours afterward in costume without appearing on the cameras. When I asked about it, my father changed the subject. He just said I had done the right thing by waking them up. Today, looking back, I understand that maybe he also never managed to fit it into something normal. Even as an adult, I still remember that image very clearly. The dimly lit hallway, the silence of the building at night, and that red figure standing in front of our door doing nothing but waiting. To this day, whenever I see someone in costume out of context, especially late at night, I feel an automatic discomfort. Because that night, Santa Claus didn't leave when the party ended. He stayed, and he stayed long enough for a child to understand, even without words, that something was very wrong. Story 7. I was 21 years old and lived in a university dormitory in upstate New York. That year, I stayed on campus during Christmas because I couldn't get a ticket in time, and also because I needed to work on a project. The building was almost empty. Most students had gone home and only a few rooms were occupied. Mine was on the ground floor with a large window facing a lawn that, in the summer, was usually full of people. In the winter, at night, it was completely dark and silent. I was already used to that silence, but that week it felt heavier. On Christmas night, I went to bed early. It was cold, the heater made an irregular noise, and the dorm hallway was far too quiet. I woke up in the middle of the night to a sound that took a few seconds to make sense. Someone was singing. A Christmas song, sung very softly, almost like a whisper that was too perfectly in tune. At first, I thought it was coming from a distant room or maybe from someone passing outside. I lay there trying to figure out the direction of the sound until I realized it was coming from directly beneath my window. I got up slowly and went closer to the window, but without opening the curtain right away. The voice kept singing, always the same song, repeating the chorus with a strange calmness. When I pulled the curtain just a little and looked outside, the singing stopped instantly. It didn't fade, it didn't move away. It stopped, as if someone had held their breath. I looked out at the dark lawn, trying to make out a silhouette, but I didn't see anyone. I stood there for a few seconds, my heart racing, and then went back to bed, telling myself it must have been someone passing through campus. A few minutes later, the song came back. Same melody, same volume, coming from the same place. My stomach dropped. It didn't sound like someone walking. It sounded like someone standing still. I waited a bit longer, trying to build up courage. When I approached the window a second time without even touching the curtain, the music stopped again. That no longer felt like a coincidence. It was as if the person knew exactly when I was looking. I went back to bed, but I couldn't relax anymore. I lay there, listening to my own breathing and waiting for the next sound. The third time the song started, I was already sitting up in bed, hugging the jacket I had left on the chair. The voice sounded a little closer, or maybe it was just my imagination because of the absolute silence in the dorm. It was a male voice, low, singing very slowly, without missing any lyrics, without laughing, without any hint of joking. It wasn't cheerful, it was controlled. I stayed completely still, trying not to make any noise at all, and even so I felt that it didn't matter. When I took 2 steps toward the window, the singing stopped again, as if someone were watching my reflection in the glass. I went to the bedroom door and looked through the peephole into the hallway. It was empty, with dim emergency lights illuminating the carpet. No sound coming from inside the building. That confirmed that the voice was really coming from outside. I went back to the window, but this time I didn't open the curtain. I stood there, feeling the cold rise from the floor, trying to decide whether to call campus security or if I was exaggerating everything on my own in the middle of the night. While I was thinking, the music started again, even quieter, almost pressed against the glass. My entire body froze when I realized how close the voice sounded. It no longer sounded like someone on the lawn. It sounded like someone leaning against the wall, right below the window. I could hear small pauses between the verses, as if the person were breathing slowly, controlling the rhythm. There were no footsteps, no leaves rustling, nothing to indicate someone moving. It was just the voice, steady and patient. I stayed away from the window, sitting on the floor with my phone in my hand, but without the courage to call anyone. Part of me was still trying to find a simple explanation, something that wouldn't justify the fear I was feeling. After a time that felt far too long, the music stopped completely. It didn't come back. I stayed there, not moving, waiting to hear some sign that the person was leaving. I didn't hear footsteps moving away, or doors opening, or anything. The silence returned and filled everything, heavy as before, maybe even worse. Only when it started to get a little lighter outside did I find the courage to stand up. The sky was turning a pale gray and the campus still looked empty. I approached the window carefully and pulled the curtain back slowly, bracing myself to see someone down there. The lawn was empty. There was no one, no movement, nothing out of place at first glance. But when I got closer to the glass, I saw clear fingerprints smeared across the outside of the window, as if someone had rested their hands there for a while. They weren't old. The cold had fogged the glass in some spots, and the marks were far too clean to be from previous days. I looked down and saw a red beanie lying near the wall, right below my window. It was simple, wool, and still looked damp from the early morning dew. I stood there trying to understand when someone could have gotten that close without me hearing anything besides the voice. I pulled the curtain all the way open and took a few steps back, feeling my stomach churn. I grabbed my phone and called campus security, explaining what had happened. They came after a while, looked at the beanie and the marks on the glass, and said they would file a report. One of them commented that it wasn't common for someone to be on that area of the lawn at night, especially during the holiday, when there were barely any students around. That didn't reassure me. I went back into the room, closed the window, and sat on the bed until the sun was fully up. The dormitory was still almost empty, but it never felt quiet in the same way again. After that, I couldn't stay in that room the same way. I spent the rest of the day with the curtain closed, even with the sun outside, and kept the light on until night. Campus security said they would increase patrols, but made it clear that they hadn't seen anyone on the exterior cameras that night. That only reinforced the feeling that I had been awake while someone was there below my window, close enough to touch the glass, sing, watch, and leave without being seen. There was no sign of forced entry, nothing that justified a bigger action. Everything stayed in that gray area between strange and we don't have proof. I stayed in the dorm until the end of the holiday, but I slept very poorly. Any sound coming from outside made me sit up in bed immediately. I never left the curtain open at night in that room again. To this day, when I hear someone singing softly out of context, especially Christmas songs, I feel the same tightness in my chest. Because that early morning in upstate New York, someone stood outside my room, singing in the dark, and only stopped when I looked, as if they knew exactly when I was watching.
Thank you for staying until the end of this video. It's amazing to have you here accompanying me until the end of the stories. If you liked it, leave your comment telling what was the story that moved you the most. And if you are not yet registered, sign up so you don't miss the next ones. Until next night of scary stories.